Okay, welcome all to today's masterclass from the Interaction Design Foundation, excuse me. Hi everyone, I'm Frank Spillers and I'm your host for today. I'm the CEO of Experience Dynamics and I teach a few classes on the Interaction Design Foundation. And today I'm going to be joined by Alan Dix, and I'll give you a little bit of an introduction to Alan in just a few minutes. So welcome for those of you who have just joined us, and big welcome back for those of you who are joining again to the webinar today. And if you are also taking classes on the platform, welcome back to this community event here. I wanted to just talk a little bit about the Interaction Design Foundation and this community of like-minded people who are studying interaction design, UX, and other topics. And you're accompanied by 66,000 fellow graduates here, 29 online classes, and this is probably one of the biggest online communities in the world, and has been going since 2002. We've got universities like MIT and University of Cambridge, SAP, Accenture, IBM, some of the largest companies around the world also using the lessons from Interaction Design Foundation. It is a nonprofit, and we have meetups in 400 cities and 90 countries. When I say it's a nonprofit, just a little bit about that is, so what you get in these master classes is these short, immersive kind of live webinars with industry experts. The rest of the time, the rest of the platform offers you access to much deeper material and subjects that can go on for 10, 15 hours or so at some of these classes. This class today, this 1 hour session is $1 for members, and that's the special price that the nonprofit can offer. So I'm very happy to be part of Interaction Design Foundation's mission, which is to really give affordable education to as many people as possible, and that's really one of those gifts from the wonderful Danish society that the IDF, Interaction Design Foundation, exists in, whose mission, I think, the society's design is to keep everyone happy, and it's kind of a cool place where the Interaction Design Foundation initially is based from. But of course, we have world experts from around the world like Alan, who we're going to talk about today. So this is a masterclass called How to Harness Your Creativity to Design Better Products. And we're joined by Alan Dix. The thing about this class is that it's basically you're in a design related role, which means you have to be creative. And in order to be successful, you have to be consistently creative, right? You have to keep being creative over and over. And that means you need lots of imagination, knowledge, and skills to develop ideas and solutions, sometimes on the fly, as many of you know. And this constant pressure is sometimes leading to creative blocks, which many people are familiar with. Writers, artists, designers, even engineers and managers run into them from time to time. And the good news about all this is that each of us has limitless capacity to be creative, and nobody basically lacks creativity. So Alan is going to show us in this masterclass how to regenerate your own creativity. You're going to learn how to continuously generate new ideas and how to create both a mental and physical space for creative thinking, and also how to manage your time and dedicate time for creativity. He's going to teach us some hands-on methods that we can use, and also teams can use to help ideate better. So I want to talk a little bit about Alan before we officially hand over to you. I'd like to introduce the man of the hour here. It's Mr. Alan Dix, Professor Alan Dix, and author Alan Dix. So some of you know Alan, and he is a professor, creativity expert, and co-author of one of the most influential and seminal textbooks in human-computer action, also called Human-Computer Interaction. And on a personal note, I came across Alan's work many years ago when I first got started in the UX field. So I think if you're really, really interested in digging into human-computer interaction, Alan Dix is the man for you. He's currently the director of the Computational Foundry at Swansea University, which created a 31 million pound investment from the European Union to the Welsh government, the university. And he's kind of pushing the boundaries there. And I think probably this creativity lesson he's about to give us comes from the work that he's currently incubating there. He's been teaching creativity and innovation since the mid-90s. And he's going to teach us some of those novel techniques that we can use with our work today. And I just want to say, you know, I wasn't kidding about Alan Dix. This guy has been in the human-computer interaction field for 35 years, and he has written dozens and dozens of articles and numerous on numerous topics, like even as far as AI and rural technology. In 2013, he walked 1,600 kilometers around Wales as an exploration of technology and the physical and social margins. And if that doesn't give you an insight into Alan Dix, this guy is thorough, and I'm not kidding. I've come across his work, and I thought this guy really gets it. So I'm a big fan, Alan, and I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today, and want to hand over to you if you're ready to take off. And
okay, cool. Thank you very much for that introduction, Frank. And we were having a wonderful conversation just before that, so much so that we had to be pushed to get everything ready in time because we were just enjoying chatting so much. And it is an absolute pleasure to be doing this masterclass for Interaction Design Foundation, because I think the work of the foundation is amazing. And, you know, so I've contributed work before to it, and there's a new creativity course coming out that I've prepared that is going to be coming out very soon, and this masterclass is sort of prompted by that. And yeah, it's a fantastic. So really pleased to be talking to you today. So yeah, creativity is a difficult way. You know, sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. When it's easy, that's fine. The trouble is when it's not. So what is creativity, first of all? There is no simple definition, but I'm going to say creativity is that place where novelty and utility meet. And this is effectively the definition that's been used in some of the sort of psychological studies of creativity. To be creative, you need something new. And that might not be absolutely brand new to the world, but at least new to you. But it has to do its job. Now, that's even true in the arts. So it's got to be new, but perhaps be pleasing, perhaps be good to the ear if it's a piece of music. But of course, in interaction design and in user experience design, we want something that does that job for the user. So we want something new typically, because we're trying to solve some problem, and it's got to do its job. And that isn't always easy. Now, sometimes that's something really big and world-changing. So on the left there is a guy called Arthur Fry, but you'll probably recognize the Post-it note on his head. So, you know, Post-its, he was the person who found, we'll come back to exactly how, but invented Post-it notes. Post-it notes have changed the world, you know, not like nuclear power stations, but in different ways. And on the right is the Stark lemon squeezer, which its utility is debatable, but it has an aesthetic quality and is iconic. It's one that's, you know, every design student learns about. So sometimes you have things like that are really big, you know, it's quite creative things. But also there's a lot of day-to-day ingenuity and creativity going on. So the image you've got in front of you is just not quite a random one, I looked for it, but this is just somebody presumably in a motor shop somewhere, who've stuck tire on their wall and using it as a pin board. And you can see the pins into the tire. This is day-to-day creativity, day-to-day ingenuity. And both of these are critical. Sometimes they seem really different, but are not so different. Now, in UX, of course, we have lots of creativity challenges. Now, sometimes they're perhaps a bit more like the Post-it level. You know, we have something really bespoke, quite big, which is really about designing something new. So just a few days ago, I was talking to somebody about how you marry machine learning and human interaction in engineering design. So there's lots of work on machine learning and trying to use that in engineering. But how do you do that in ways which allow a synergistic interaction? Now that requires big creativity to actually do that, you know, new ways of having interaction. Sometimes there's some sort of general questions that you can ask creative questions about. So perhaps the sort of thing that I've had to do in my history actually as someone who creates things to give to other people. So, and we'll come back to this one in a bit, but like how to deal with very long menus. And you've probably encountered that problem yourself. They run off the end of the screen. How do you find the images and stuff like that? And so how are you creative about that kind of general thing? And then we get these little tiddly decisions, but are boys so important? Like, you've probably been there. You've got your perhaps a screen on a website, or it's something that happens that you're going to stick in that menu, and how you get that long 14 words description down to one short word or two that is going to mean what it means in the menu and help somebody find it. So we've got constantly at all sorts of levels creativity things to do. Often, I said, if we think of those big creativity things, it feels like this is something that only a few people have. And certainly there's one view of creativity, and I think it's very easy to feel that it's something that you've either got or you haven't. So, again, think about that, that genius level, whether it's Einstein, if you're thinking of science, or Arthur Fry there with his Post-it notes, or Stark with his lemon squeezer. It's a genius thing. You're either a genius in design or you're not a genius in design. And you sort of feel, well, I'm not that kind of person. And you feel stuffed. You might have been there. I've been there at times. I mean, another bit, which is sort of related to that is this idea that it's this sort of muse that comes to you from above. You can't do anything about it. It either hits you and you have the wonderful idea or not. And there is a truth to both those things. It's not that we're all equal in this world and in things. Some people clearly are, have new ideas more than others. And certainly it is the case that sometimes ideas drop on us and when we're least surprising, and sometimes we find it hard. So these are not untrue, but they're not the whole story. So even if we look at these big iconic examples of creativity. So again, here's Arthur Fry again in the Post-it notes. So the instant idea is Arthur Fry, you might know the story, he invents his glue, he's trying to do a glue, and he finds his glue and it's just not very sticky. And then somehow or other, you get the idea that, if the glue's not very sticky and keeps coming off, you could use it to put things temporarily, and the Post-it note comes from that. And there's a truth to that story, except that story takes 2 years. It takes 2 years of Arthur Fry going around, it's called 3M, that's right, forgot the name of the company a second, where this is invented, talking to people about this glue that doesn't quite work. And then somebody in the audience coming to him afterwards saying, hey, perhaps, and that's where the Post-it came from. A lot of time, 2 years of time, and a lot of teamwork and coming together. Even the Stark lemon squeezer, which the story is, he sits in this restaurant one night, I think in Italy, and has this moment, you have the lemon squeezer. In the design, I forget which design museum it is, there is the napkin that sat at the dinner table. Now this happened quickly, but the napkin is full of scribbles. It starts off with some scribbles, which are standard lemon squeezers, some scribbles, and at some point, and I think the order is hard to tell from the napkin, but at some point squids appear, and then they sort of come together and you get this lemon squeezer. But even that, there's a level of evolution, of development, of taking an existing thing and taking something else and seeing cross-inspiration. It doesn't just magically come into his head. It's something that came out of a process. So what we can try to do is start to think about those processes, emulate them, and allow them to help us to, on demand to some extent, be creative. Now, when I say on demand, I don't mean there's like a creativity machine and we can just turn the handle and chuck out creative things. It's not quite like that. However, what we can do is try and create the spaces that allow us to be creative. And by that, I mean spaces in a number of ways. Physical space is important, to talk about that, but particularly the mental space to allow us to be creative. So can we create those, the right toolkit that is for creativity? And if you watch the tutorials, you'll see I actually drink a lot of tea, and I was no tomorrow after, so I will drink my tea, because this will make me more creative, because I need my teacup. This is iconic. My first book didn't have a mug, but had a teacup on it. Really, I'll show it to you after, Frank. Anyway, so we're a place for creativity. Now, sometimes it is about actually a physical space. So here's a couple of pictures of me. You know, one of me, I'm at a desk and I'm working on a computer, another sitting down. Now, it works different for different people, but sometimes if you actually think, when I sit on my chair, that's when I do my perhaps more outside thinking, perhaps where I'm doing my reading. When I'm on my desk, that's where I'm doing that sort of worky stuff. Sometimes that kind of thing can help you. It might be a different room in the house. It might be your home versus your office. It might be like Dylan Thomas, the boat shed overlooking the river at Larne. But, you know, so sometimes you can do that. What makes a good space depends on you. And that's something, again, when I was doing this creativity course for Interaction Design Foundation, I found myself again and again saying, you know, you do have to learn to listen to yourself, because what's a good space for me to work may not be the right space for you. But you can also create these habits by not doing certain actions in some place. It can become open. I mean, I certainly struggle not to just read email all the time. And so places, and that might be using a different computer even. I've been trying to work on that actually, but ways that you can stop yourself from getting caught. Even what you wear. So today I have my Interaction Design Foundation t-shirt on. For today, so I'm setting myself up into the mode. And you might notice again that any of you who do the creativity course afterwards, I wear the same, not this t-shirt, I wear a different t-shirt, but I wear it for all of the videos, and it's sort of me getting into mode. You know, some people even wear special hats. I'll let you decide that for yourselves. Crucially though, it is about creating the mental space. So having these physical spaces is about getting your head into the right place. I often find almost like literal, sort of semi-literal space. There are certain activities that are particularly good for me again, but I think these are quite common. In the shower in the morning, you know, I mean, if I was doing a poll now, I'm not sure there's no way to get hands up, but I'll bet loads of you would put hands up for having ideas in the shower in the morning. You know, just going for a walk, washing the dishes. There is a particular nature to these tasks. They're usually tasks which sort of keep you busy, so you can't be doing something else, but are not so mentally tied that you can't think of anything else. And they're particularly good for often allowing you to mull over things without feeling you need to get a result in them, which is often a really crucial part of creative processes. I'm not going to say never do this. I have said listen to yourself, so this might work for you. But typically, you don't want to be too directed. If you say, I'm going to wash the dishes in order to think about how I'll design long menus, probably not going to work. Just like sitting there at the computer and trying to do it. But again, you might be different. So crucially, you have to listen to yourself here. Now, one of the times when I certainly did have to get in the well, not get into the shower, listen to what happened in the shower, listen to those things, listen to what happens. I woke up in the morning. Again, for me, that's good. Some of you, that's going to be rubbish. But for me, those few moments as I wake up, things percolate through my head. Because one of my most difficult creativity design challenges of the last few years was when I had to do time managing creativity, which is not an obvious thing to do. And again, no silver bullets here. There's things that might work for you, might not. So I'm just going to offer a few things here, and but also listen to yourself to what works for you. So one thing I try to do is to literally make time space now. So there's physical space, time space. And again, you'll be the same. We all live very busy lives nowadays, salami sliced lives. There are some tasks that if you start it, and you spend an hour on the task, you've done an hour's worth of work. Most creative tasks are not like that. So the type of time management that works for the kind of task where you start and then you do 10 minutes of it, you do 10 minutes of everything else, does not typically work for creativity. You typically do require chunks of time. So things I try to do, I don't always succeed, is to clear the decks in two ways. So one is sort of like backwards. So I try and do small things that are sitting, especially on my mental to-do list, but also on my physical to-do list, getting them out the way. And then for the others, if I know, and again, ordering your life so this can be the case, this can be easier or harder. If I can think next week, tomorrow, there's an hour, there's a day when I can do those other tasks, scheduling them off, saying that's when they're going to happen. So those things are not constantly battling at the back of your head saying, you know, do me, do me, do me, because you know they're going to happen, they need to happen, they're going to happen. Leave yourself that mental space that you can breathe in and mentally breathe in and be creative. And you notice here that a lot of this is about feeling. So it's the things that are worrying you, you're trying to remove. Emotion management is crucial. It's crucial for all of our lives, but particularly when we want to be creative. It's, again, there is research, all the research there is on creativity, and it's very difficult to do. Positive emotions tend to make us more creative, you know, so we can get ourselves into those positive moods. And that's often more important than the sort of time management itself. So I do things like, if I've done something and it wasn't on my to-do list, I will write it on my to-do list and cross it off. Because then I see all those crossed off things, and boy, does it make me feel better. Making myself feel good, managing my emotions. We can also sort of, now this sounds a bit, we'll come a little bit more detail, try to plan away from creativity. Well, you know, we want to be creative people, but we know it's hard. So how can we make it less necessary to be creative, to do the creative things? So one of the things I try to do, again, doesn't always work and it varies on the task, is to use the big time I've got, the time where I can afford to think about things in order to do the large scale creativity. So given an interface, perhaps you're thinking about the general way in which a system will work, the general pattern. It might be the big metaphors or that you're going to use for the system, the general patterns. When I find myself working down to too much detail, I'll often stop, because those details are the sort of things I can do in a smaller chunk of creative time. Now, sometimes you need the detail to spark the big thoughts. So it's not that you never do detail, but at that point at which you think, well, actually, that's the sort of thing I could do in a half hour between other things. You push that off, you know, make it, you know, do a to-do list item, whatever way you put it, chuck it in your Jira board if you're that kind of person, but breaking things down. Okay, so let's go into that a little bit more detail. What do I mean by breaking things down? So what I've done here is by the way, I should say, originally I was a mathematician. And as a mathematician, you love to see 2D diagrams, Venn diagrams and stuff. So the world becomes a flat space that you do. It's all to do with geometry and going back to Euclid. So anyway, so I've turned the world into a two-dimensional matrix, right? Complexity of tasks. And perhaps I shouldn't have even said complexity, because certainly size, volume, things that got lots to them. But the other axis, I've got the creativity and the emotional energy you need to do that task. So there are some things that are quite simple, and you know, so bottom left, quite simple, not much creative energy. Other things need a lot of creative energy. So let's look around that picture. So first of all, that bottom one. So these are the things that are really are not going to take much time. They're not very complicated, and they don't require any of that creative juice or emotional juice. And they're probably quite slightly different, but they're easily similar. So for those, what I tend to do is to try to clear the decks of them. Get them done. Again, if you read a lot of traditional time management books, they will talk about exactly this. You know, if something takes less than 5 minutes, you might as well do it, because otherwise it's going to take you longer to think about it. Now, there are two reasons for doing that. One is to get them out of the way, but why get them out of the way? Because they're sitting there sapping at your strength. They're saying, we need to be done, we need to be done, we need to be done. So if you can't put them off, you get them done. And that's now, again, doesn't work universally. If those tasks are just constantly always going to be arriving, maybe you don't do that. Maybe you try and stop the stream coming for a while. So, but if there's some things sitting there, sometimes just getting them done frees you to then think, now I've got some space. And that's what you try to aim for. Okay, next lot. These are things that are complicated but require low energy. So this would be something like writing a long report, but where you're really, say you've done your big usability test, you've got lots of feedback from focus groups, or you've got lots of data from the web, and you've already done the thinking about it, right? But what's left is just getting it written, right? Yeah, and this is the sort of work, you do an hour's work, you've done an hour's worth of it. Those are sort of things, they're going to take up the time. Don't want to use my prime time for those. Push those off to later, schedule them. Again, you can't always, they might be the most urgent thing and you have to get them done. And I will say this now, again, there are differences between time managing for creativity and, should we say, standard time management. And standard time management is typically about the things that you're seeing here already, things that don't necessarily require massive amounts of creativity, massive amounts of emotional energy. There are these kind, I do an hour and I do it later. And there, what you want to do often is schedule the most urgent things first, or the most important things, which sometimes get missed out. With creativity, we are trying to make space, because that's where we're trying to get the gaps where the creativity sneaks in. A little thing to Lemnico in there. So you put those off to later if you can, or leave them as a filler. So sometimes when you've done something that's a bit of a wow, you need a little bit of a gap before trying the next wow. And these are good things to put in those gaps. Then you've got the little creative tasks, which are two categories in my experience. One of them is just for little things, so it might be about tweaking some little bit of design in some little bit of a website, some page. It might be a bit of codiness. I get my hands dirty with code and twiddling away on that. And they're small, they're not very complicated, and it's quite fun, and you do something, yeah. But then there's the things like the difficult email and stuff like that. So there's two kinds of things that are not complicated, but take either creative or emotional energy. Those emails are some of the things I often try to reschedule, because I will do them at the last minute, however much I want to put them off. But I can spend hours sitting, not sending an email. So again, this varies from person to person, but you've probably got tasks that are like that. Things that take up time by not being done. If that's the case, reschedule it, because otherwise it's just going to eat all of your time. But of course, the place we really want to be is the nirvana of these really big, complex tasks that require energy, that require creativity. That's the thing we want to solve. They're the really nice things. They're the like doing the post-it notey type world, the designing the really novel way of doing something. So that's where we sort of like to be, or designing a course, or designing the time managing complexity of a course. So what do we do with these? And this is where this planning bit. So I said, I'm not saying I always do this, but one of the things I try to do is try to use, when I manage to cut out those parts of prime time, is to think about these things, but typically to try to think about them, to break them down into bits that are small enough to do later when I've got smaller units of time. And usually they break up in two ways. Sometimes they break up into these really tiddly tasks, which is great, because those are sort of things you can just do and get done. So it might be I should have thought of an example of this, but say it is just literally just, doing the actual details. You've sketched out what's in the menus in your system, and you just need to get them entered into the system or something like that, into your design tool, if you've worked on paper first and then worked electronics. And those things, I do find actually those activities are really useful to do also as a sort of preparation. So if you've got a big thing to do, a big sort of creative thing, a new interface style or something like that, if you have some sort of chuntry tasks that are sort of related to that, if you do those, they often, because they're not requiring huge amounts of mental energy, they often prepare you to do these wow bits. The other thing, of course, and is perhaps the harder one, is breaking them down into these smaller creative units. So you still need to be creative, but perhaps don't require as much. So again, it's similar sort of thing, but those do require creative time. They do require usually space time, but it might be the sort of things you can do in half an hour if you've managed to clear your mind, or you perhaps can sign to the back of your head and you suddenly realize how to do them. So again, that might be, for instance, the difference between deciding the whole style of an interface and particular menus, particular screen designs and things like that. So there's a sort of difference in scale. I said it's sort of obvious. It's what you always do when you're doing project management. But I said the crucial thing I think to remember is that planning is a creative start. So the big idea, but the plans themselves are often creative. And I said, I'm going to emphasize again, this is emotional work. A lot of this is about managing emotions, about, getting that sort of horrible, oh my goodness, I've got this huge thing, what do I do with it? Down to something where you can say, okay, now it's become manageable. And that's something I can, and of course, the more you're stressed, the less creative you are. Now we can have, so that's, when you think about the emotion work, that can also feed back to the kind of organization you want to work in, and also the way you organize your own life. So organizationally, we're going to go back, we're back to, what's his name again? Oh yes, Arthur Fry again, with the post-it notes. Arthur Fry failed. He failed to design a strong glue. Right? Now, I talked about the time when he went talking to lots of people in the organization, but what kind of organization allows you to fail to produce the right glue and then tell people about it? It's a forgiving organization, and 3M at that, I hope they still are, but at the time this happened, was an organization which in some way or other, how they managed it, I'm not sure, but they created the culture that said it's okay to do things wrong. And of course, that allowed Arthur Fry to both fail in his glue, but also think maybe it might be useful. And have that inkling and to be able to tell other people, I failed to do what I wanted to do, so that they were in the position to say, but it does something else. Now, that's an organization to want to be in. But often we're our worst, I mean, you can be whether or not you're in an organization like that, or if you're perhaps working on your own, often we're our worst critics, aren't we? I don't know about you. Again, I mean, one of the terrible things about to-do lists is they just keep saying, what did you not do yet? That really, but I'm going to say, failure, this sounds like, one of those motivational posters you get up with, it might be, I was trying to think what it might be. It'll probably be like a chicken trying to peck its way out of an egg, failure sows the seeds of next. Sounds all a bit wishy-washy, doesn't it, right? But of course it's true, it really is true, right? Now, I'm going to have to do this one thing, but sometimes I forgot to write something on one of these beforehand, otherwise I could have done a really good one of these. But sometimes you've got your idea and you think that was rubbish, right? And you're about to throw it in the bin. Before you throw it in the bin, open it up, have another look at it. Ask that question. Now, it might be you really do throw it in the bin at that point, but looking again at those things that you've come through, giving them a second chance, just like Arthur Fry gave it a second chance. So it sounds trite, but, and you'll have been in this position. Get used to, because you'll often do this without realizing you're doing it. Because if you've written it down, you can see that crumpling up happen. But if that crumpling up is happening in your head, if a thought comes through and you're dismissing it instantly, it might be rubbish. Sometimes you do want to throw it away. But just get used to noticing yourself do that and just take one last look. And often, even if it's not that you think, oh yes, actually it is a wonderful idea, it's just thinking, actually perhaps I should hold on to that later, because maybe there is an inkling there. That's what Arthur Fry did. He held on, he told people about it, and wonderful things came from that. So, I said I've been talking a bit about this time management creativity, but, and planning it and stuff. It sounds very determinative. You can see little bits of my maths background sneaking in here probably. But I'm going to say a creativity plan is actually something to do when you can't think of anything better. Right? And actually, I think things like organizational strategies are like this. You know, organizations have their missions. I think strategy is something to do when you can't think of anything better. Now, that doesn't mean it's not a good thing to do, because you wait, you know, you've got this hour and you think, what do I do with this hour? You need a plan for something to do in that hour. But if there's something better, that's often the better thing to do. Right. So this is, I will let you and fill in the extra letters in the middle of this. But I'm going to tell you, so this isn't an acronym I can say. It looks almost pronounceable in Welsh, actually, Dwyfl. But it's not, yeah, certainly not very pronounceable in English. So anyway, I'll tell you what it says. It's do what you feel like. So when you've managed, you know, to create one of these precious spaces, you know, it might be a few hours, it might be a day, it might be a week even, depending on where you're at and what you're doing. You've created one of these spaces. And when you enter it, when you start, now it might be there is nothing on your mind, and then you'll use your traditional thing. Which of these list of creative things that I've got that I need to do? You know, oh my goodness, my to-do list of creative things. Which one of these is, you know, top of my list? You know, that's what you normally do with time management. You choose the top of the list item. You've used some good way of sorting them, so you know, you might be by importance, it might be by deadline, however you do it, and you pick off top number one and you do it. But if something is in your mind, if something is wiggling away in your head, forget what's at the top of that list. Do the thing that's in your heart at that time, because that's what you'll be most creative with. It's what you'll be most successful with. Now, sometimes you can't do that. Sometimes there's something that's so urgent that has to come first. But if there's a choice, go for where your heart is at that moment, and you're much, much more likely to produce something really great. Okay, so we've had quite a bit about time management, and so we're going to move on a bit now. So what happens when you get to that gap? We've made the gap, we've made it. You know, we have the gap for our creativity. Nothing is burning inside me. I mean, you've probably been there. If anybody who's written will have that with the blank sheet of paper, right? You know, what do you do? Filling that void is so hard. When you've got something there, often it sparks other ideas. Getting yourself going is really hard. Now, then a number of techniques for doing this. And again, if you're either if you're a member or if you're interested in it, they go to the full course, and I'll give some other ideas, but there's also lots of other places to look for techniques. So I'm just going to talk through one technique that I've found really useful. I'll do this. Yeah. In general, if you think about it as a creative thing, there's two kinds of creativity. There's many kinds, but there's two kinds. There's sort of ant-like creativity where you twiddle, 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 and you're doing small things that are making things better. You know, hopefully that's possibly the easier, but it varies. Some people struggle. You know, if you're, you know, tend to the person who sort of has lots of bright ideas all the time, you might struggle to do this kind. And then there's the flea type creativity, who makes some huge leap. But of course, if you know about fleas, they jump randomly pretty much. They notice warm. When I was a child, different to Teacup, but I used to sit on the carpet a lot, and we had a cat. And the cat had fleas, and I'd go to my cup of tea, and the tea was full of dead fleas, because they just jump, and they can land on, if they're lucky, they land on the cat. If they're not, they landed in my teacup. So, you know, very good for generating lots of, but you don't get there. Typically, the key to creativity is getting these two to work together. You know, generating that novelty through divergence, but often using sort of convergent things that tie you down and bring you back in, the ant-like stuff, to actually get the utility. Now that sounds like a one-way process, but in my experience, actually it's not. It's cyclic, because what happens is you get those more concrete things, we often react to those, see new ideas, and it generates us back out. So one technique that I've used a lot over the years to help on the divergent stage is a thing called bad ideas. So have you ever been in one of those meetings where you say, we're going to brainstorm, and we're going to be, you know, we're going to all be forgiving of each other's ideas. We're not going to have there's no judgment here. And have you believed it? Right? You know, it's so hard, isn't it? No, it's so hard to yourself to say, yeah, nobody's going to judge me. It's very hard not to do that to other people. So what I say is, don't bother to make a good idea. Deliberately make a really silly, a really bad idea. And then look at it as if it was a good idea. Think of it seriously. So you generate this crazy idea. You can then afford emotionally to critique it, because it wasn't your super brilliant idea. So it might be some really complicated thing, or it might be like a chocolate teapot. These oxymoron ideas often quite good. You just put things together. And then, and I won't go through all these, but you can start to ask questions about it. You know, why is a chocolate teapot a bad idea? You know, does it, you know, and then you might start talking about the fact that you put hot tea and it'll melt or something like that. But then you can sort of start digging that deeper. Well, is melting bad? Well, obviously melting isn't bad. You know, melting's good in some circumstances, like if you wanted hot chocolate, it might be good. And similarly though, and perhaps sometimes harder, you generated this silly idea and they say, well, although it was intended to be a silly idea, what's good about it? What's clever about it? I once was in a situation with this, where the bad idea was an inflatable dartboard. And so after a bit of prompting, actually took a lot of prompting for various reasons, for people, you know, it's full of air, but then you think of other things that are full of air that are good, like, you know, like floating toys, right, that go on pools. And then you think, well, okay, but there's other things good. So what's really bad? Well, it's because it bursts it. And then you think, okay, well, we know floating things can be quite good. Bursting's bad, can we put them together? And this didn't come from, but wait, I found this photograph on the internet of a deflatable dartboard. But as soon as you think about this, you start thinking about Velcro darts and stuff like that. You have product ideas. It's quite amazing. So you try to make it a good idea. Look for what's good, you keep it. What's bad, you change it. So this is being convergent on the divergent idea. So what I'm going to do very rapidly, because I want to give you some time for Q&A, is go through an example. Now, one of the problems of doing creativity stuff is you always roll out the examples you've seen before. You know, it's like there's a program called Blue Peter for children in the UK, and here's one I did earlier. So I did do this earlier, but I deliberately did something new for knowing this webinar was coming up. And literally this was waking up in the morning. So in the evening, I tried to think of a bad idea. And my bad idea was thinking about long menus. And I thought, let's just randomize the order of everything in the menu. So if it's the font menu, they're all over the place. You know, if it's, you know, lists of, you know, maybe even randomize the telephone directory, you know, that really bad. You know, this is clearly a bad idea, right? No question about it. And effectively, so I'm going to interrogate this a little bit. So what's bad about it? Well, I mean, there's probably lots of things that are bad about the random menu, but one of them is it's a little bit hard to find the thing you're after in that big menu. But what's good about it? Well, I thought serendipity actually, as I was realizing, if it's random, there'll be something at the top that perhaps I've never noticed before. You know, maybe if it's a font, it might be a font I've not seen. If it's a system, maybe it's like, you know, the way you just go for things and there's all those items you never look at. So perhaps it would prompt me to see things. So now I can think about, you know, the serendipity is good. Can I tweak the badness? Maybe I'm going to get rid of the completely randomness, cheating a little here, but I'm going to hold on to that serendipity. How can I design menus that maintain that serendipity? So, I mean, then now I'm just thinking ideas generated by that. So I was thinking perhaps you could track, you know, so given the serendipity, what we do, we might track the menus that people have, look for the ones that don't get used. And you know, those little prompts you get when you start a system, it says, I have a right idea, have you tried this? You know, tell them the things that you know they've not used. Very, you know, very simple. It's very simple. I don't know if anybody does that. They must do. I'm sure somebody must be doing that, but I don't know. And then can I fix the menu item stuff? So again, what we're trying to do is look for good ones. So again, you know, having thought about tracked behavior in the first one, I was keeping my head on knowing what users use. There's you'll have seen the technique where you put commonly used items at the top of the menu. You know, you can sort of have variations of that. But then, you know, pulled by the two, I was realizing there's a very old menu design where you gray out the things that you think are expert. It was called Training Wheels, designed by Jack Carroll originally.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is for a novice, you have all of the menu items, but only some of them are active, and you grey out the inactive ones so they see them there. And then I sort of thought, well, perhaps we should do something like that. You still have your big long list, but you highlight the things that you think the person's likely to want. You don't pull them to the top. Again, I've never seen a menu that does that. And of course, amongst those ones that you think the person does use a lot, you might also slip in a few that they don't. You know, maybe even using other people's behavior, a bit like Amazon, people who use this menu item use that. So that suddenly this serendipitous stuff actually gets pulled back into the menu. And certainly that last idea, you might have seen it in some other system. It was new to me, novelty for me, not necessarily to the world. So this for me was quite good. I've got the new way of doing menus. I'll try it out sometime, all because of doing this course. And I think, yeah, that gets me to the end of the slide.
Awesome. That's so great, Alan. Really appreciate you going through and sharing that with us. It's been a real pleasure. You really got me going there. I was thinking, for me, one of the things I do is I try and read. I think so. Reading books is a really good idea if you're stuck on your devices. There is a really good book I read recently. I don't know if you've read it. It's called. Just came out, and I think it's due out later in the U.S. This year. It's called Deep Work.
Okay.
Mentions a lot of the techniques of roles, just seeing other is social media stack. I just won't read them for years, and it's because because it's too much inside of my tribe. I find it like that. It's I'm so I tend to try and lose myself in other subjects. But even what you were saying is so relevant. That last example, Spotify, I listen to every day, the app, for music or something. SoundCloud, terrible. If you want to look at bad UX design, they don't remember the station. I'm listening to a regular station on Spotify. You have to go and search it it's just ridiculous. But they do have a favorite feature. You reminded me as well, actually, of one of the things I do in my trainings, in my offline trainings, is to have one team do an anti-UI pattern, what you were kind of suggesting, and the other team do a proper, best practices. And you know that the guys that are doing the anti-pattern are having way much more fun. And I actually think even though it is more fun, and in a lot of ways it's easier because you can kind of just goof around and play, but that's what you were suggesting, the goofiness. It reminded me of course, the benefit, as you said, is if you can deconstruct the nonsense, the silliness, the anti-pattern, then you're actually demonstrating that you're making a conscious and careful choice about what you're making a bad UI for, right? So it's a strengthening. But one of the best conference papers of all the conference presentations I've ever attended, there was a paper that was called, it was about nonsense, and it showed how interaction designers versus improvisation, improv comedians, they both generated design ideas. And the improv actors, or the people that were doing improv, would generate something like 25% more than the UX designers. The UX designers went and took improv classes, and they came back and tested. And the UX designers improved their ability, but still the seasoned improv people were by far above them, generating something like 110 design ideas compared to like 65 or something after the training. But it is important. Improv is another thing. Nonsense, anything that takes you out of your rigid and fixed and familiar zones, I think is the key. And you shared that with us today. I want to go to if you're ready to take some questions from our audience here.
Yeah.
You really got me, you got my gears going on your presentation, but let's go to our audience. And
Okay, yeah.
Vinay says, how do I keep my creative juices flowing when I'm under pressure of deadlines?
Oh, Christ. Yeah, that's an easy one to start with, isn't it? Yeah. As I said, I've, in my own life, and so I'm going to give it from person, and I think you do have to, there's a lot of generalizable stuff that we have, but also you need to go back to yourself for this as well. But that's one of the reasons I was talking about clearing stuff, is knowing, and in fact I do, I was just looking to see if it's within.
Alan, can you stop sharing your desktop screen?
Oh yeah, surely. How do I, help. Yeah, sorry. This is me now having to work out, how do I?
I think at the top there might be a stop.
Share, is that it?
Stop share.
Is that right? Is that gone off now?
Nope, still see the hammer.
Okay, stop share.
Yeah, that's it.
Is that better?
Excellent. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yes. So I'm new to Zoom, so I think
that's okay. So creative juices under pressure. How do you keep that?
So one of the reasons I was talking about that pushing out is that, I have this exactly, and in my to-do lists I have these little pink sheets which are all the deadlines and stuff. In the end, if we have deadlines that are just happening so fast we can't deal with them, but that should say there's something wrong with the job, something's going wrong. So that might be a question about looking back. And again, we can't always do things about it. Sometimes that's given by our organization, sometimes that's given by the nature of our job. So there isn't a golden bullet here. But the thing that helps me when I manage this, and I'm not saying I always do, is this business about trying to, you have to do those deadline things, but if you know that you can do the work within a period, then you can schedule it forward. You can push it into the future. So, and again, the creative tasks are the ones that are hard to do this, which makes it more important that you try and carve the time to be able to do that planning. By plan, I do mean this sort of planning where you're actually, it's the high level thought process that go on. And I will often write that into my to-do list as rather than do X. And and it doesn't matter how tight the deadline, I get scared eyes like a rabbit. So I'll often write a plan task. And what the plan, I said, it doesn't mean just write out, right? It means doing that thinking. And I break it into those smaller tasks. I said, it sounds trivial, and for any particular task, we can sort of open up more. But crucially, I think there's two things here. One is the fact of deadlines, and it's the way in which they affect your thinking. You are as a scared rabbit, and so that's why I was talking about that emotion management. So again, it would vary on you, how we're all different on this, but
yeah.
I'm trying to constantly do things which help me to manage myself using knowledge you have for yourself. So if you can start to listen to, this sounds like one of those life skills things, but listen to the things that help you get calm in that face of that. But it will depend, I'm afraid. There's not going to be a single answer because it's going to depend on the nature of that. Sorry, that's not that helpful, but.
No, I think, the other one of the things I took away from your overall presentation there, was that this is a set of habits a set of practices that you develop, carving out time, managing your emotions, having special physical spaces, and then generating the mental spaces. But I think one thing I was going to say, and it's actually our next question from Eugen, is related to viability or feasibility, is under pressure creativity. What do you call it? MVP, minimal viable product.
Yeah.
Maybe just try a MVI, minimal viable idea. And the thing for me that under pressure, especially in business environments, is, and especially with demanding bosses, is what is the minimal you can get away with? I think for me, this is why I always advocate teams have good contact with users, like user research, because when you have an insight into user behavior and a user's environment, and it makes it easier to say, what's the priority here for the user? And then to, like if you have 5 features and you need to design all 5 features really quickly and you don't have time, but you can advocate and say, look, these 1 or 2 features are really the most important. We know that can help too. So that speaks to developing organizational capacity with regard to that. So Eugen is saying, when is it appropriate to think and share about feasibility and viability before ideation or after?
Yeah. So I think, so again, this one of the problems of it varies, of course, such a lot on again, background and that, but I find being concrete certainly helps in creativity. And there's a real tension there. So actually having things that are sort of feasible, so I've said to do the bad ideas, but I often find digging down to something concrete whilst holding on to the fact that it's not supposed to be the final point is one of the things that helps me there. So it allows me to then spark off. And one of the things I sort of didn't say about that, about the use of the bad ideas and stuff like that, but is also, as you ask these questions, what you're doing is you're building that understanding of the area, and a sort of high level, almost like a roadmap. So certainly that's sort of one of the things that I find. And it's interesting what you said about the 5 ideas though, because when I first worked in usability, I sort of thought that the problem, and this is what we do in usability testing, is finding all the problems and fixing them. And so there's 2 insights. I'll give number 1, which I think anybody working for any length of time knows. You very rapidly can see problems even before you even just look at, oh, crumbs, that's going to be. There are loads of them, so many. And you can often think about how to fix them. Again, sometimes it's really hard, but often you can think, oh, knowing which ones it's worth fixing, that's often is the hard one. However, the other thing I will say about that, which is this sort of counter. So almost I feel you need to do these 2 things. You need to hold on to, and actually sometimes I talk about this with creativity plans, doing the thing that's almost like a step-by-step thing, but then leaving a little bit of your mind outside of that loop. Now that might be by spending time on it. It might be because, you can sort of train yourself to think like that, whatever. So because particularly in usability work, what we often end up doing is effectively doing an ant journey. And that is good from the point of view you're always getting better. You're always getting closer. You're always getting a bit, to the food source or whatever. But when we're in that fixing mode, when we're in the MVP mode or the MVI mode even, you sometimes have to jump back because actually you might be just in the completely wrong area and you need to make that big jump. Yeah. And it is really, you need to do both. But I find that being concrete helps me be abstract. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Whereas the traditional academic, certainly the traditional computing thing is you try and do everything very, very, very abstract. Being concrete, I think, helps mm-hmm. you to jump those levels up. Yeah. But I said, yeah. Does that help? I'll stop there because I could go on.
Yeah. Yes. And I think so. And asking questions, I think I would say, like, what is this an example of?
Brilliant.
And to abstract, what are examples of this thing that you're. So if you keep asking that question, what is it? So Dahlia's asking a question about what do we do to create mind spaces, and we're kind of getting up on the time here, but it's in the midst of how do you create mind spaces for creativity in the midst of a work day when it's not always possible to take a walk or do mindless activities when I'm at work, but I'm still required to present a great idea in a few hours. Any tips on how to create a mind space for creativity when you're sort of in a big corporate block with fluorescent lights and
Yeah, no, so, I mean, one thing again, but you're probably not in the position to make these decisions is if organizations, if that's a question that people in an organization are asking, it's, the organization should be thinking about the nature of it. Says this is why a lot of the West Coast organizations have the pinball machines and all that sort of stuff. So obviously, if you're in the position to change the organization, do it, but obviously you often aren't. maybe, and again, this becomes, again, very personal. So some people like to create blank space. So again, you might just have your cubicle. Some people fill it with things that help prompt them.
Mhm.
I will, even within my office, move between two, but I've got enough space to do this. I've got obviously a big enough office between table and desk, because I'm training myself, but I am in the midst of this training to use my phone for my communication, and try and not always have it open on my computer, because, so that's, I mean, again, it is difficult. We aren't, so I'm not going to pretend you can, you can magically do all these. You can make some of these placements, but try it to both, whether it's your digital space or whether it's the physical space around it. Find out the things for yourself. Listen to yourself. I sometimes talk about personality prosthesis. I won't get, it's a long story about that, but this is about looking at yourself. When you look as UX people, we are used to looking at our users and saying, how do we create something that gets that user to be able to do their stuff? If that's what you're doing day to day, look at yourself and ask that question about yourself. And your design tool here isn't necessarily a website or an app. It might be about the plant that sits there, or it might be about having it all blank. It might be about closing, I won't close the computer now because you won't see, but closing that computer down and just having the closed laptop in front of you rather than the open one.
Right. Cool. We're actually out of time, Alan. Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
It's been great, and I know this is such an in-depth topic that we could go on for hours. Now, if you do want to go on for hours, Alan has actually created a course which you'll get an email with a recording to this one, and it's going to have that new creativity course by Alan Dix at the Interaction Design Foundation site if you want to explore this deeper. On behalf of Interaction Design Foundation, very grateful that you have all attended with us live today, and again, hope you apply Alan's advice for the most impact that you can in your work, and subscribe to our newsletter to get informed of upcoming masterclasses if you're not already on the list. And again, thank you so much for joining us today, Alan, and sharing with us. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you all, and we'll see you on a future masterclass.
Okay, thank you.